Alright, this is Pre-Cal 11 and this is 7.1 talking about simple interest. Simple interest is really good at explaining a concept. It's not very good or used often in real life because most of the time what you're going to be dealing with is what's called compound interest. Although simple interest, you could use it once in a while, but for the most part, it's okay. The formula for it is I equals PRT. Basically, I is the interest you're going to be earned. It's usually expressed in dollars. P is the principal amount, or the amount you're going to start the money with. So if you invested $100 to begin with, $100 is your principal. R is your annual interest rate, and it's always going to be given as a decimal. This is tricky because your interest rates are usually given as a percentage. So if you're given a percentage of an interest, you want the decimal version of this. So the way you do that to convert it to a decimal is you basically divide it by 100. T is your time, and it's going to be expressed in years. If you're given it in months, you have to use it as a fraction of a year. Same goes for the annual interest. This is saying annual is once a year. Sometimes it's quarterly, sometimes it's monthly. These two R and T, that's kind of where the math gets involved. The expressions are usually really easy. Start with what you know and basically plug it into your formula. So if you invest $8,575 for 2 years at 4.25% with annual interest, how much interest rate are you going to earn? So the way I would express this is you always want to start with your formula. We know this is simple interest because there's no mention of the word compound. As soon as you see the word compound interest, we know we have to use compound formula. It's then not a bad idea to start with all the different parts of your formula and see what we know. The interest rate, we don't know. That's what we're trying to find. The principal, we're starting with $8,575. Our annual interest rate is 4.25%. Now, we want this as a decimal place, and don't let that 4.25 trick you with that. We want to make sure we get rid of this decimal. So what we're going to do is we're going to divide it by 100. All that really does is it moves your decimal place over 2 positions. If you're still not sure, it's not a bad idea to plug into a calculator. So the answer we're looking for is 0.0425. That is what we're going to use in our formula. Probably the biggest step most students forget. And our time is simply going to be in years, so we have 2 years. Next, we're just going to plug it into our formula. So 8,575 times 0.0425 times 2. So after 2 years, in theory, of investments, we should make approximately $728 and 87 cents, which we can round up to 86 cents. Now, the reason why simple interest isn't as useful for us is because, especially if you're dealing with any sort of bank loan or you're buying a house, you're getting a mortgage, they're going to do what's called compound interest. And compound interest is basically, right now we calculated the interest only earned on that $8,575. However, after 1 year, you'd make approximately half of that. So we'll say $300, and now your new investment, or your new principal, would be $8,575 plus that $300. So the second year of interest would be slightly more because your principal has gone up. Hence what's called compounding. It compounds up as you go. So much more useful for your life, but simple interest gives you a good idea of approximately how much you're going to make. Our second example, we have a principal that was invested for 6 months at 5% annual interest rate that earned $72.25 in simple interest. What was the principal amount? Again, same thing, always start with your formula. And again, I like to just sort of fill out and see what I don't know and what I do know. A couple things here. We don't know the principal amount. In fact, that's what we're trying to find. We know how much we made in interest because it's saying it was $72.25. The rate was 5%. Again, we want to turn this into a decimal, so we're going to divide it by 100, which means the actual rate was 0.05. And if you don't trust, or if you can't figure that out, you go 5 divided by 100 to get your answer. The time is a bit tricky because time is always dealt with in years, and we're given 6 months. So we're going to go 6 months, and we know that in 1 year, there's 12 months. So really the time ratio we're going to deal with is actually a half, which is really 0.5. When we plug this into our formula, we get 72.25 equals our principal, which we don't know, times 0.05 times 0.5. Trying to get the principal by itself, because these are all multiplying, the opposite of multiplying is dividing. So if I divide both sides by 0.05 and 0.5, these will cancel out, which means I'm left with my principal. So $72.25 divided by 0.05 and divided by 0.5 means we started out with a principal of $2,890. Again, simple interest. When it comes to an amount, really all they're doing is they're talking about the total between your investment and your loan. So rather than just saying, by the way, if we look actually at our first example, this is your investment. You made $728 plus your principal. The amount is really just saying what's the combined total between the two. It seems a bit silly to make it into a formula, but they make you guys understand this. So the amount, or rather the total between your principal and the investment, you add the two. So A is the amount, P is your principal, and I is the investment you basically made out of it. More useful formulas are these two. Basically, it's going to be the amount equals your principal plus your principal times your rate times your time. You'll notice that PRT is really just your interest rate. So these two is just saying, hey, this is making you calculate the interest rate and then add your principal to it to get the total. This is doing the exact same thing. It's adding one extra step by saying your principal is just times 1. So it is the same thing. All formulas work the exact same. Your most useful one is probably this one, just because it reduces the redundancy of having multiple steps. So, if you have a principal investment of $2,500 for 200 days at 1.45% with annual interest rate, what is the amount of the investment? Basically, what is the total? When you walk away or you pull everything out of the bank, what do you have at the very end? So we use the second formula. A equals P times, that is a 1, very hard to distinguish sometimes between an I, 1 plus R times T. And again, it's never a bad idea to write out what we know and what we're trying to find out. So, we know what the amount is, we don't know what the total is. We know that the principal was $2,500. Our rate was 1.45%, and again we're going to divide that by 100, which means our rate is actually 0.0145. The time is 200 days, and again we want our time to always be in years, so we're going to try and figure out how to convert 200 days into a fraction or a ratio of years. So if we think back, we know that there are 365 days in a year, so 200 divided by 365 tells us the exact fraction of a year we're dealing with. So 200 divided by 365 says it's 0.5479. I'm just going to float it. That's our fraction, or the percentage of a year. It's not quite, it's actually a little more than half of a year. Then we're just going to plug it into our formula. So A equals our principal, 2,500, times 1 plus our ratio, which is 0.0145, and that is going to be times by our fraction, which is 0.5479 and some change. Remember BEDMAS rules, do your brackets first. So I kept my fraction for years. We're going to multiply that by 0.0145. We're going to add 1 to that. And now we're going to multiply that by 2,500. So the total amount, after you've pulled out your investment, is you're going to walk away with $2,519.86. Which means after 200 days at 1.45%, you've made about $19, maybe $20. Usually if we were in class, I'd talk a lot about credit cards at this point in time, because you'll notice that if you ever give the bank money, or you give any bank money, or institute for that matter, that 1.45%, 3%, 5%, these are ridiculously high interest rates. You'll never get these. We're talking, we're lucky or we're happy if we get like 0.6% or 0.7% is unheard of. But if you ever get a credit card, most credit cards, if you default on payments, their interest rate is like 30% or 33%, and it compounds monthly. So we'll talk a bit more about in compound interest, but credit cards can be scary if you use them properly. If you use them properly and pay them off every single month, you're usually pretty good. But be very careful. For the, I think it's the last example. Yeah, for the last example, it's asking you, what is the principal that you must invest if we're dealing with 2.15% of annual simple interest to have a total amount of $236 after 3 years. So we're going to be using the same formula because we want to find the total amount. We're going to find out what our principal is because we don't know what that is. We're going to find out what our rate and our time. We know that the total amount after the 3 years is $236. Our rate is 2.15%. Again, we're going to divide that by 100, which means our actual rate is 0.0215. Our time is simply 3 years. Now you could rearrange your formula at the get-go, you could do it at the end, you could fill it in and just rearrange as you go. I kind of like doing it that method myself, where if I fill this in, we have an amount of $236 equals a principal times 1 plus our 0.0215 times 3. Always multiply first before you add. 0.0215 times 3, and we're going to add 1 to that. So 236 equals P times 1.0645. We're trying to get our principal by itself, so we're going to divide both sides by 1.0645 to cancel out. 236 divided by that means our principal investment was $221 and a whopping 70 cents. And after 3 years, you made $15. So, big money. Alright, that's it for 7.1. You have 2 questions with this. The first question is going to be, how much interest are you going to make if you invest $300,000 for 10 years at 0.8% using annual interest? And realistically, in a real life situation, 0.8% is probably far too high, but it'll give you a bit of an idea. Question 2 is, if you invest $50 for 70 years at 2.5% with annual interest, how much are you going to make? So this will be 70 years versus 10 years. If you have any questions or concerns, I will be online Tuesdays and Thursdays for a tutorial. Otherwise, good luck.